back in person for the first time for a while, so it feels good to be here.
So I think in lieu of actually calling roll, we can confirm that all 7 appointed members are present, 5 are physically present, and 2, Commissioner Bernhardt and Commissioner Baffa, have joined us via Zoom. So we have a quorum. And do you know if Margie's unmuted?
I am unmuted.
Okay. Margie, can you confirm that the Kansas Open Meeting Act required notice has been provided for today's meeting?
Yes, I can confirm that the packet was posted and the required notice of the meeting was provided.
Okay, so that allows us to proceed with today's agenda.
Outstanding. On to the approval of minutes for March 2nd, 2021.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes of the March 2nd meeting.
I second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So on to new business.
We have a number of public hearing items for you this afternoon. Actually, there are 6 public hearing items on your agenda. And the very first item is a Planned Development District application. That application has been filed by Salina County, and they are requesting 2 actions this afternoon. First, a change in zoning district classification from I3 heavy industrial to create a planned development district with the public use, public facilities as the underlying zoning. And they are also requesting approval of a combined preliminary and final development plan for a new Salina County Law Enforcement Center, which would include a new county jail facility. The proposed location that we're looking at is on the south side of East Pacific, east of North Front Street, in the Marydale addition. And the future street address of this location would be 800 East Pacific. So in the background section, we provided you with some information about what is known as the Marydale addition. And that is a platted subdivision that's bordered by North Front Street on the west, on East Pacific on the north, and Ohio Street on the east. And it is also bordered by the Union Pacific Railroad tracks on the south. It was originally comprised of 45 acres. It had been divided into 2 blocks containing 61 individual lots. It had historically been zoned for industrial use, but the western portion was and has been farmed continuously since that time. In 1995, there was a portion that was replatted to serve as a site for an ADM facility, and because of the ADM facility was located over what would have been an extension of Woodland Avenue that connected with Pacific. Woodland Avenue was cut off and turned into a dead-end cul-de-sac street. However, the street has never been improved or built. And in December 15th, 2020, the Salina County Commission approved a contract to purchase an 18-acre portion of the Marydale addition from the Lavelle Frick Trust to serve as a location for a new county jail facility, which the voters approved in November. That purchase contract is contingent on obtaining acceptable soils reports and receiving all required planning and zoning approvals for the project by the city, which is the role that you are serving today. So before we got to where we are today, as a first step, the jail design team noted that the platted right-of-way for Woodland Avenue runs right through the center of the future jail building site and needed to be vacated. So there was a joint petition filed by the Lavelle Frick Trust and the county requesting that the public right-of-way for Woodland Avenue be vacated, except for the west 200 feet. And as you can see, this is kind of a flag-shaped lot, or what we would refer to that. It has 200 feet of frontage on Pacific Avenue. All the access in and out of the site would be from Pacific Avenue. The plan indicated by the design team was that the west 200 feet of Woodland Avenue would be constructed and serve as an access for emergency vehicles coming from the west. The plan was to construct secure gates at the east terminus, and that general public and delivery vehicles, all general traffic, would enter the site from Pacific. The City Commission approved that vacation on first reading. Second readings being held in abeyance until there's an approved site development plan for the site. And we're going to discuss a little more in detail the design options for Woodland Avenue as part of our report. As we noted, the purchase is contingent on the necessary zoning approvals occurring to allow construction of the new facility. The I-3 zoning presently in place does not list correctional facilities as a permitted use. The only district that does is the Public Use Public Facilities District. And the existing Salina County Law Enforcement Center was approved as part of a planned development district in 1993. So this is following suit, and the request is to rezone the site from I-3 to a planned development district. And the belief is that the planned development district with public use zoning would be more compatible with the public ownership and planned use of the property. So, as we pointed out, the main difference between a planned development district and just a conventional rezoning is that the planned development district process requires a specific site plan to be made a part of the zoning change. And so what you're seeing on the screen is the overall site development plan that was submitted on behalf of the county. And so in a planned development district, the submittal by an applicant and the approval of a site plan represents a firm commitment that the actual development on the site will follow the approved site development plan. So for your benefit, on a standard commercial lot or standard lot within the city, you apply for a building permit, staff reviews your site plan, and determines whether a permit can be issued for the use in the plan. In this case, you are serving as the role of reviewing the site plan. And so the general plan is for a building that's about 153,000 square feet. It would house a 392-bed jail facility and would also house new administrative offices for the Salina County Sheriff. There's a couple locations where potential future additions or add alternates are shown. So they are planning this for future expansion if it becomes necessary, because they are, and so you can see that the purpose of the public use district is to provide suitable locations for governmental facilities which serve a public need, to accommodate the unique operational needs of public buildings and facilities which are owned and controlled or used by the city or other governmental body, to ensure that sufficient land area, open space, buffering is provided by public uses so as to minimize potential adverse effects on adjacent uses. So we've given you a pretty long summary just to familiarize you with the public use district classification. But as we've reviewed this plan, the plan submitted by the county's architects conforms with all the requirements as to height, lot coverage, setback, all of those things, so they're not requesting any modifications as part of their plan. And so in terms of the suitability of the existing zoning, we've determined that jails and detention facilities are not listed as permitted uses in the I-3 district. The only use where they're allowed is the public use public facilities district. Staff does not believe that the current I-3 zoning matches the intended ownership or use of this property, and inhibits good planning for future improvements on the site. The use being requested is certainly more suitable under the public use district, and after extensive study, the county determined that expansion of the existing jail facility was not a feasible or cost-effective solution, given the site is landlocked. And so this site was chosen because it had the area for future expansion, because of its central location and its accessibility from an arterial street. So you can see that we have railroad tracks on one side, a mix of commercial uses on the other, and then there is a residential area to the west, but as you can see on the plan, the boundaries of the jail facility will be 200 feet away from North Front Street, and so there'll be a built-in buffer between the jail and any nearby residential uses. And so we think if there's adequate setbacks and light spill is controlled and the jail building itself is not stark or unattractive, we don't see that this facility will dominate the immediate neighborhood. For most part, public utilities are in place to serve this facility. There is a plan to bring a water line in and extend it and loop it up, connecting Pacific and Front Street, and also loop it around the building to provide fire protection all the way around the building. And then there's a plan to extend a sewer line from the jail facility down Woodland Avenue over to Front Street. In terms of the drainage pattern in this area, it's mostly southwest and northeast, and the designers are proposing to construct a detention basin in the northeast corner near the entrance. And that would discharge to the north of Pacific Avenue, across the Beverly property, and go to the flood control levee. As far as streets and traffic, we just wanted to point out that, as you are familiar, the subdivision regulations for the city require that if you have a dead-end public street, it has to terminate in a circular or other approved form of turnaround. The original design showed a secure gate at the east end of Woodland, which is basically reflected here. And I don't know, Dustin, can you go to the turnaround drawings that we have that are separate? But the plan that they have submitted, the original plan just had a single gate, and you would drive from the west and run into that gate. But they have modified that plan and are proposing a turnaround. So what they're proposing is that there would be two gates, one here to the north and one here to the south, and if you were a delivery truck and you mistakenly came this way, you would be able to use this as a place to turn around and go back out. And so in lieu of a circular turnaround, they have designed a hammerhead, and the dimensions on that have been designed to accommodate box trucks, semi-trucks, and fire trucks, in addition to passenger vehicles. And that concept has been reviewed by the city engineer and fire marshal. So, Dustin, we kind of had a slide that kind of walked through the elements of the site plan. So, as we noted in this case, because it's a single parcel and the level of detail, the project designers are requesting that this be considered a combined preliminary and final development plan. So if it's approved, there would not be a need for a second step to come back with a more detailed final plan, because this plan has all the elements that would need. But just by way of summary, we're looking at a facility, the main facility is There would be a new sheriff's office and a jail facility with approximately 100 employees there. The sheriff's office has a lobby area, office, conference rooms, training rooms. The jail facility has a booking area, kitchen area, medical areas, and as we noted, facilities to house 392 inmates. There are dashed lines on the plan that indicate areas for potential future expansion, and they would be able to construct those additions if they're consistent with what is shown on these plans. They have a future annex building kind of to the southwest of the jail. That is an add alternate, and then they have a dashed-in area that shows the potential space for a future county office building on the east. One of the things that we wanted to talk about is parking. The plan shows 145 off-street spaces. As you can see, the lot coverage is only 20% of the entire lot. The driving and parking and paving would only cover about another 20%, so about 60% of the lot would still be open space. And as far as our orientation and all, the building will be 360 feet back from Pacific Avenue. And the public entrance to the building would be oriented to face east, and the jail portion would be on the back or west side. As far as the building itself, it will be precast concrete panels and architectural metals with an aluminum storefront facing east. If some of you recall reviewing the plans for the Salina Police Department training facility out on Yost Drive, this building would have a similar appearance to that in terms of materials and appearance. And so Dustin is going to show you the elevations. The other building that this has some, as far as exterior materials and colors to a degree, some similarity to the Foley Equipment building that's up on North Ohio by I-70. Some of the front and exterior materials are similar to that Foley Equipment building. And so for perspective, the main part of the building is 18 feet tall. The jail portion would have a mezzanine. It would be 36 feet with that roof height. One of the things we looked at was look back at parking requirements that were required back in 1993 when the current facility was built, and we used a requirement of one space for every 25 inmates based on the inmate population, and that was for visitors, then one space for every employee. And then we also have a requirement of one space for every 300 square feet for office space. And so when we looked at those, we were thinking that if we applied that standard in this case, we would be essentially double counting employees, because we would be looking at employees and then also looking at office space. And because of the intense nature of the employees here vis-a-vis the sheriff's office, we think that the best measure to use is employees. And so we see a requirement for at least 16 spaces for visitors to the jail or other, and 100 spaces for the jail support staff, for a minimum requirement of 116, and they're providing 145 on their plan. If we use both employees and then double counted the office space at the sheriff's office, we would end up with over 200 spaces being required, and we think that is excessive. This plan will have signage, and it will also have landscaping. They're proposing a monument sign out at the entrance on Pacific, and Dustin has identified a Saline County wall sign that would be on the east facade of the building. And so both of those signs are within the parameters of the sign regulations for the public use district. And finally, there is a plan for site landscaping, both on the perimeter and within the parking lot itself because they have over 50 spaces. And so we do want to compliment the county's design team. They have clearly, they carefully read the city's design standards and regulations and attempted to design to those in this facility. So our last thing to consider is the comprehensive plan. And while there's not an application on file to formally request an amendment of the plan, we think that an amendment should be considered and could be justified in this case to support the zoning request. So in terms of action this afternoon, the first action item to be considered would be whether the land use plan should be amended to show this as public and semi-public instead of as part of an employment area. And the reason for that is because the public, semi-public would be indicative of a large-scale government facility. And so your options would be to reaffirm the existing plan and keep this as an industrial area in terms of land use, or you could recommend that the future land use map be amended to show this tract of land as public, semi-public. The second action item would be to consider whether the zoning map for the city should be amended to change the zoning classification to PDD, public use, public facilities. And so you could recommend approval of the requested zoning change and the preliminary development plan, subject to any conditions or limitations you think are appropriate. You could recommend approval of the zoning change, subject to design revisions being made to the site plan. You could postpone consideration of this application and continue the public hearing to allow the applicant or staff to provide additional information. Or you could recommend that this request be denied. If after considering all the evidence presented at today's hearing, you wish to recommend approval of the application, we have on page 11 and 12 listed some conditions we think that would be appropriate to include in any action to recommend approval. And those deal with that the hammerhead turnaround shall be designed and built to city public street standards, and that dead end and no through traffic signs be posted, that the city engineer approve plans for the Woodland Avenue extension and the stormwater detention pond. The director of utilities must approve plans and specifications for public water and sanitary sewer line extensions. We get a detailed planting plan, a detailed site lighting plan, and that an all-weather access emergency road and an operational water system be in place before vertical construction on the jail facility. So we've summarized on page 12. We've recognized that the Salina County Law Enforcement Center, as currently located, is overcrowded. It's landlocked where expansion's not feasible. This property has been vacant and undeveloped since 1973. The existing industrial zoning doesn't reflect the intended ownership or use as a governmental facility. This property is adjacent to an arterial street, and it's buffered on 3 sides by industrial development and railroad tracks on the 4th side. Needed utilities and drainage facilities are in place, and the location of the site is consistent with the locational preferences for large government facilities in the comprehensive plan. And amending the plan is justified in this case due to changing conditions in the community and the lack of interest in developing this property for industrial purposes. So that's a whole mouthful, but at this point I will pause for any questions you have about staff's report, or if there's any of the slides or maps that you'd like to see Dustin put back on the screen to look at, please let us know. And the same would go for Mr. Baffa or Mr. Bernhardt if they would like to see something again.
Thank you.
There's two motions then. One to change the zoning and then one to approve the site plan, is that correct?
Well, the recommendation on the zoning would include action on the site plan. The two alternate actions we were looking at, the first action would be to consider whether you as a commission think that the comprehensive plan should be amended to show this as a public, semi-public land use area instead of industrial. And then the second action would be to consider whether you think the zoning map should be changed to show this as public use, public facilities. So within that, there's two options. One is to recommend the zoning change and the plan together, or you could recommend approval of the zoning change, but ask that certain revisions be made to the site plan.
Well, I would move that we amend the comprehensive plan
Well,
to accommodate this project.
we're still on the question and answer session, so we want to take an opportunity for that, and then also to get public comment. So I'll turn it back to the chair. If there's no further questions for staff, then we would see if there's interested members of the public.
No more questions? Okay. Anyone from the public, would you like to come up here and comment? Okay.
We do not appear to have anybody on Zoom requesting a comment either.
Thank you. Do we need to hear from a representative from the applicant, or is it?
Well, we do have the Salina County Administrator here if the commission might have any specific questions related to that. I
don't.
I haven't checked, and we can check with Margie, but the two architects on the jail project indicated that they'd be joining the meeting by Zoom, but there's Matt Murphy. So he is one of the jail designers. So if Mr. Smith doesn't have any comments, the first thing we do is see if anybody has questions for the county administrator. And then the second thing would be to hear from Matt Murphy.
Anyone have any questions?
I have a question for Matt Murphy. I could not make out the landscaping schedule. What plants are proposed?
Well, Commissioner, we have a number of plants proposed. We have a couple of different tree species that are selected there. I think Dustin zoomed in on the screen. You can kind of see we have both oaks and sarcovias as our main trees. We then have a mixture of different shrubs and decorative grasses, mainly along the eastern side of the building, which will be coming in along the entrance drive, and they're focused in the public lot, as well as around some of the staff areas along the north side of the administrative part of the building. And then we have two different ground covers proposed, both a warm season and a cool season grass, trying to, again, keep within the design guidelines of the city standards of no more than 50% cool season grass or warm season grasses. We have a mixture of turf grass in the areas that will be kept a little bit more mowed and manicured in the front areas where we have site security and clearance issues. And then going to a little bit more of a native mixed area along the outer perimeter of the drive and out around the annex along the west side of the site.
My feelings are that Zelkova, although it's a great tree, is not a native, and we need more native trees in the in Salina for that matter. And if it was up to me, I would make that exception in a motion.
I believe it's on the recommended list for the city, but we're certainly willing to amend. We can certainly look at choosing another native species here. That's not a problem at all.
Yeah, I'm fighting for the xeriscape list that the city has proposed, but I'm also looking for a native plant list too, because wind turbines kill 1 trillion insects a year. And anything we can do to promote insects is Zelkova is not going to be conducive to insect growth.
Understood. We can certainly find a replacement for that species.
And oak, another species of oak would be good.
Okay, we can look at that as well.
Is there anything, Matt, that I didn't touch on well enough or may have misstated or overlooked in the summary of the plan?
No, Dean, I think you hit most of the highlights. And I think the only graphic that I didn't see pop up was the actual hammerhead. But again, as you mentioned, we are proposing a hammerhead there at the end of Woodland on the west side of our site. The dimensions of that hammerhead in the north-south direction would be approximately 135 feet, which, as you mentioned, can accommodate any regular vehicle in terms of a truck or a car, but it can accommodate up to a box truck as well as an intercity semi-trailer, which is roughly a 45 to 50-foot trailer.
So the primary concern is that somebody making deliveries to the jail or something might inadvertently attempt to get there via Woodland, which will be a public street, and we don't want them to run just into a gate and have no options. So they have worked with staff, and we've come up with a plan to create a hammerhead there so that if you have entered that way by mistake, you've got a place to turn around and get back out. Do you want to comment, Matt, about the gates, how they will function and how they relate to emergency access?
Sure. The gate on that side of the site, the northern gate will actually be a security control gate from central control within the facility. So it'll be an armed gate that'll have an intercom and a camera for egress. And then the gate on the south side of that hammerhead will be a fixed gate that will be locked and only be accessible if a member of the sheriff's office comes out to unlock it or someone from maintenance.
But the fire
But
department,
it will be a monitored gate.
the fire department will have a Knox key that would allow them to access that direction as well, correct?
Yes, sir. We'll have a Knox box at that lock gate location that would allow fire department access.
So with that, I think we've covered all the bases unless you all have questions for the project designer.
I just got one question about the existing facility now, or what are the plans for the existing facility once this is completed, or do they have any?
I
sense
really
that
speak
might
to
be
the-
directed at me.
Yeah, I think they want probably directed at Saline County, so.
Commissioners, Philip Smith, Haynes County Administrator. So we don't have any firm plans. We've talked about a number of different options, including we've investigated the possibility of locating a juvenile facility there and trying to get some of the juvenile offenders back from Junction City where they currently go. We thought we had some good interest in that. They may have run into some funding challenges with state funding related, because of COVID and state revenues. The other thing that we've had just some very preliminary discussion is whether Salina PD needs to expand into a portion of the building, particularly as it regards their evidence storage, which we understand is very impacted at the current time. We've also had some conversations about whether we could find another county department that would be compatible with that. There aren't a lot of things that you can easily move into a former jail facility just because of the thickness of the walls and that sort of thing. But there might be some facilities that we could look at, maybe IT or something like that. So we have a couple, 2 to 3 years to figure that out here as we go through the process, of course, subject to your approval today, which we hope is forthcoming. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for your time. Are we ready for a motion?
Yeah. First order of business, we'd consider whether you think the comprehensive plan should be amended to show this as public and semi-public.
I would move that we amend the comprehensive plan.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Those in favor, say aye.
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 That motion carries. The second action item would be to consider whether the zoning map for the city of Salina should be amended to change the zoning from heavy industrial to a planned development district with public facilities. And
So moved.
we have a motion to approve the zoning change and the proposed preliminary final development plan. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Those in favor, say aye.
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 That motion carries. That will be this commission's official recommendation to the city commission, and we anticipate this being taken up by the city commission on the 26th of April. I thank Mr. Murphy for joining us and helping us out with that.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone's time today.
Thank you for your time.
The next public hearing item is item 3.2. That is an application filed by FSC Global Supply Chain, and they're requesting a change in zoning district classification from I-1 Industrial Park to I-2 Light Industrial on what we're describing as the central and western portions of their campus. And Dustin, do you have a representative drawing of that to give us perspective? So as we discussed before, in terms of background information about the platting of this area, it was platted and turned over by the federal government to the city of Salina in 1966, and that preceded turning the Air Force Base over to the city. That particular layout had all kinds of gaps and missing right-of-way pieces and things, and so the Salina Airport Authority in 1998 did a comprehensive replat of the entire original Schilling subdivision, and they broke it into different sub-areas, and the area that we're talking about today is Schilling Subdivision number 5, and it was a large area with 468 acres, had 124 different lots, 15 separate blocks, and one of those blocks is Block 12. Block 12 is bordered by Schilling Road on the north, Centennial Road on the east, Arnold Avenue, formerly Bailey Road on the south, and Arnold Avenue on the west. In 2016, what was originally Bailey Road was changed to Arnold Avenue to try to make it easier for out-of-town travelers to locate the airport passenger terminal, which is addressed off Arnold Avenue. So I didn't know do you have the color map that they submitted with their application, Dustin, or? Okay, so this is just a very generalized map, but you can see that this is the block bordered by Schilling, Centennial, and Arnold Avenue. And back in July, an application was filed to replat this entire campus, all 77 acres, except for a couple parcels along the west side. And at the time, all of that area was either owned or under contract by SFC Global Supply Chain. and it is now all owned by FSC Global. The original plat had 18 lots. It was bisected by several streets and public utility easements, so the replat was done to clean some of that up, eliminate some of the streets, eliminate some of the internal easements that were obstacles to building. And as part of that replat, there was a design to send stormwater runoff around the campus and bring it to the south of Arnold Avenue. This commission met on September 15th, 2020, and approved the plan for the full vacation of Jumper Road, its conversion to a private street, and also improved the replat. Unfortunately, since that time, the replat has not and cannot presently be recorded because Kansas law requires that the county treasurer furnish a tax receipt confirming that all property taxes on the subject property have been paid in full, and that statute takes away the option that most taxpayers have to pay first and second half taxes. And so the budget set up for SBC Global SFC Global has them paying their taxes in halves, and so the second half taxes are due to be paid at May 20th, 2021, and we'll be able to obtain a tax receipt at that time. As far as the zoning on this block, it was a mix of I-2, R3, and I-1, and the original Tony's Pizza Plant was established in 1969 in the very northeast corner of the block, and that block was zoned I-2 at the time. Some of you may remember that the former gymnasium for the Kansas College of Technology, now K-State Polytechnic, was out in that area. There was also the Schilling softball diamonds, which I confess I'd played on. And so there was a mix of uses, a mix of zoning. There was a former base hospital that was zoned R3, and that was rezoned to I-2, but the frontage along Bailey was limited to I-1. And then there's an area that was the former Nichols Barracks that was over in here, and that was rezoned partially to I-2, and then this very corner over here was limited to I-1 because it was on Arnold Avenue. And so over the years, this commission's been fairly consistent in trying to protect the appearance of the corridors leading to the airport terminal by zoning the areas along the corridor I-1 and having the I-2 in behind it. And so the result of this is that Schwann's now has a campus, and 43 acres of it is zoned I-2 and 34 acres is zoned I-1. And so the application in this case is to rezone the I-1 zone portions of the campus to I-2 to establish a uniform zoning classification for the entire campus and to establish a uniform set of development standards for that campus. The current mixed zoning results in different development limitations being applicable to different parts of their campus, and so if this request is approved, all of the land holdings of SFC Global would be subject to a single set of development standards. As a supplement to their applications, the applicant has indicated that they're constructing a new food manufacturing facility west of the existing facility. It's located on property that's almost entirely zoned light industrial. However, the expansion area is constructed, includes areas that are zoned both I-2 and I-1. And so Schwann's is proposing to rezone all property owned by Schwann's to I-2 to provide a unified campus zoning district for cohesive development. And so the uses that are proposed for this campus would all be consistent with listed permitted uses in the I-2 district. Schwann's, as the applicant notes, that they're aware that the I-1 zoning includes landscaping requirements that aren't required under I-2, and that the property along Arnold was originally zoned I-1, so that the corridor leading to the airport would include an additional level of landscaping. And so Schwann's has indicated their intent to enter into a landscaping agreement with the city for the maintenance of plantings in the Arnold Avenue right-of-way instead of on Schwann's property. And there are some plans in the works for roadway improvements to Arnold Avenue and Centennial Road to accommodate additional truck traffic. And as part of that, there is a plan for beautification of the right-of-way along Arnold Avenue. Arnold Avenue has 80 feet of right-of-way. Most of our streets have 60-foot right-of-way, so it does provide additional space for those plantings. And so we put in your packets the beautification plans for a recently completed Beechcraft Road project, and those are intended to just provide you with a visualization of what was being envisioned for the Arnold Avenue corridor. And so we've noted in there that the list of permitted uses in I-2 is more extensive than I-1. I-1 requires driveways, parking lots, maneuvering areas to be paved. I-2 paving is optional. In I-1, a landscape plan must be submitted when a site is developed or redeveloped. In I-2, landscaping is optional. The other things that are different is I-1 has a greater building setback, more restrictive on height, and more restrictive on lot coverage. So essentially having two different zoning classifications, one more restrictive than the other, has created challenges for SFC Global as they develop plans for their facility expansion. It's also created challenges for staff because we literally have portions of proposed buildings that have different zoning classifications on essentially on the same building. So having those two different zoning classifications has been a challenge, and Schwann's believes that the current I-1 zoning on the western and southern portions of their campus inhibits their ability to fully develop their corporate campus. And we do agree that now that this block has been unified into a corporate campus and replatted into a single zoning lot, it's difficult to justify having it divided into different zoning classifications. So I think you're familiar with the surrounding area. We have a mix of zoning. It's mostly I-2 on the west and on the east, and there's some I-1 on the north and I-1 on the south. So we have a mix of both. But our previous comprehensive plans have stated that major entry points into the regional airport should have street trees and accent landscaping. And the I-1 zoning was one means to ensure that took place. Now that there are plans being developed for street improvements, including right-of-way beautification, there's less justification for leaving the I-1 zoning in place. The corridor landscaping will be in the public right-of-way instead of on private property is the primary difference. So we have all the utilities we need in place. The City of Salina, the Airport Authority, the Salina EDO, and Schwann's and their design team are coordinating on plans for making street improvements on Centennial Road and Arnold Avenue to accommodate additional truck traffic. And so we don't think that the zoning change in and of itself will impact traffic or site access or circulation. It will just make the zoning of the campus uniform. So this is shown as a future employment area, which, as we noted, essentially means industrial, and I-2 is listed as a potential zoning district, so the I-2 would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And so your options this afternoon would be to recommend approval of the applicant's request for I-2 zoning on the remainder of the Schwann's campus, You could recommend approval of I-2 for the western portion, but recommend that I-1 zoning on the north side of Arnold remain in place. You could recommend that consideration of this application be postponed, or you could recommend denial of the application. If the Planning Commission determines there are appropriate findings to support the zoning map change, staff would recommend option 1. So with that, I'd be open to any questions you have about the report or any maps or drawings you saw on the screen.
Any questions for staff?
Yeah, I guess I had a question. Under summary of possible findings, mixed zoning classifications with conflicting development standards currently in place inhibit Swan's ability to fully develop and utilize their 77-acre campus. How is that? Well,
I didn't hear the question.
Mr. Olson asked under the first summary of findings on page 7, staff had indicated that the mixed zoning classification with conflicting development standards currently in place inhibit Schwann's ability to fully develop and utilize their 77-acre campus. One of the main conflict areas we've seen is that the I-2 district has an unlimited building height, and we've had, as you might guess, of the manufacturing facility, there are some rooftop facilities, there are extended stairwells, there's other things that extend into the roof line, and Schwann's designers have literally had to look carefully to see whether a roof height or a roof projection, it was on the I-1 portion or the I-2 portion to determine whether it was too tall or not. And so that would be an example by having I-1 height limit here and an I-2 height limit there, applying it to the same building with the line running down through the building, it makes it difficult to plan those improvements, and it makes it difficult to review the plans because in some cases the zoning boundaries going between portions of the same building.
Any other questions?
Did everyone were able to see the plans for Beechcraft Road? I don't know if any of you have had a chance to drive out there, but those were just put in there to show what is being considered for improvements to the Arnold Avenue corridor. So the primary distinction is that on most of our development sites, the landscaping is on the private property like it was on the jail project, but in this case, we're envisioning the plantings being out in the right-of-way on Arnold Avenue with a partnership between Schwann's and the city of Salina.
And what is the plant materials list? Is there one developed?
There is a plant materials list for what was put in on Beechcraft Road. And I don't know if Dustin has it for a slide, but it's on the very last page that's in the packet section for this agenda item, but it has chinkapin oak, greenspire linden, and lacebark elm, as well as eastern redbud and thornless cockspur hawthorn are the primary tree varieties.
Okay, one is not native, and I would encourage that we plant more native trees. And I don't want to make that a condition of approval, but again, we need to, the lacebark elm is excellent tree, but it's not native. And there's very good substitutes that are native. American elm might work. other oaks. Bur oak is probably the most preferred tree for Salina.
They have black-eyed Susans, purple coneflowers, catmint, goldenrod, and lamb's ear for perennials.
Yeah.
So again,
None of those are going to last as long as the trees, and that's why I'm emphasizing the trees.
if there are no further questions of staff, we could hear from members of the public.
Anyone from the public wish to comment on this? Okay. Do we have questions for the
Do
applicant?
we have anybody on Zoom representing Schwann's, Dustin?
You got one person behind you, Dean.
Okay.
Outstanding.
Does anybody have any questions for Representative of Schwann's?
I don't. Thank you.
I make a motion, then we accept application Z21-1 for classification change from I-1 to I-2.
I will second that. It's been motioned and seconded. Those in favor say aye.
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 I did not hear the motion. I'm sorry.
The motion made by Mr. Olson was to recommend approval of the zoning change from I-1 Industrial Park to I-2 Light Industrial.
Okay, I vote aye.
All right.
So that motion carries, and that recommendation will go forward to the city commission as well. We're gonna switch gears, and I'll chip in where necessary, but we'll just let you know that Mr. Hers is wearing 3 hats this afternoon. He's got the moderator hat, he's got the graphics hat, and then he's going to present a couple reports here. So we'll see if he can juggle.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item on your agenda is item 3.3, and that is an application requesting approval of a conditional use permit for establishing or operating a tattoo parlor and a beauty salon in the C4 district in a tenant space addressed as 206 East Walnut. And so just for clarification, the application description indicates a conditional use permit to operate a tattoo parlor and beauty salon. The beauty salon is for your information, but you don't need a conditional use permit to open a beauty salon in downtown Salina, but this is a combination use. So we'll see if Mr. Hers is ready to roll.
All right. I think we are ready. So the story behind this particular application is the applicant, Mr. Valen Laska, and his wife, Hannah Laska, both are artists here in Salina. Mr. Laska is currently a tattoo artist, and he's looking to open up his own practice. And his wife is a hair stylist, and she is also looking to open up her own practice. And so what the two are looking for is a tenant space in which she can have her hair stylist operation, and he can have his tattoo parlor in a single space. And the location that they're looking at is 206 East Walnut, which is a tenant space within a building that is in the original town of Salina, which was platted in 1862, and the building in which they are tenant space of was constructed in 1910. And you can see kind of on this aerial photo about where their tenant space is located within that building. And that building is at the southeast corner of Walnut and 5th Street. So that's the tenant space that we're talking about. And the reason we're here is in October of 2011, the Planning Commission and City Commission created a new ordinance that moved tattoo parlors from uses that were not allowed or prohibited in the downtown area to uses that were conditional, meaning they may be appropriate on a case-by-case basis, or they may not be, and that it's the Planning Commission's job to look at those situations on a case-by-case basis and see if this particular case, it is a good location, a conducive location. So there are no special regulations in the C4 district for hair salons or for tattoo parlors, with the exception of the conditional use permit, in which we're looking at the impacts on the surrounding area and the neighborhood and the downtown as a whole. So in this case, we have a tenant space in which the applicant is proposing to call Studio 206 Salon and Tattoo Collective. On the screen, what you can see is what that is proposed to look like from the outside. The applicant states that the tattoo parlor and beauty shop studio will expand the diversity of uses and add more personality to the downtown area. And the actual tattoo activities will take place within an enclosed room. So here is a floor plan that is being proposed by the applicant, and in these particular cases, this is a lot of times what the Planning Commission focuses on, is what is the inside of the building and what impacts might this particular use have on people passing by or the surrounding area. And so in this case, the applicant is proposing to have a lobby open area as you enter. The lobby area is for both the customers of the hair salon as well as customers that may be looking to get a tattoo from Mr. Laska. The operations of the business will be by appointment only, so there shouldn't be a lot of people waiting or loitering. That's always a concern with these types of uses, because in the past where we've had tattoo parlors in the downtown, that has been an issue, not always, but there has been an issue with the Iron Street one in the past. The tattoo area will be fully enclosed and privatized from both the lobby area and from the outside. So people walking by, they won't see people getting tattoos. Even people within the salon won't see people getting tattoos. The impact on the neighbors, the applicant states the proposed tattoo parlor and beauty salon business would attract people to the downtown area, and there would be no work-related activities taking place in a visible area for people passing by. As I noted before, the noticeability of a tattoo parlor is usually one of the big things that the Planning Commission considers, particularly the function of the amount of wall or window signage, as well as the number of individuals gathering on the sidewalk. The applicant is proposing inconspicuous signage with just some window decals that on first glance don't bring your attention to the fact that it is a tattoo parlor. There currently are 2 tattoo parlors in the downtown area. One is at 111 through 115 East Iron, and that was the first one that was approved. And then in 2019, there was a second one approved at 117 South Santa Fe. Looking at the public utilities and services, there are no proposed changes to the site. The site currently has a sink in it because it was previously a beauty salon, previous tenant, so it's well set up and equipped for the tenant's proposed use already. The building already has a segregated area that's shown in the floor plan for the tattoo operations to take place or procedures to take place. And there are no additions being proposed, and all the utilities that are necessary are existing. In looking at traffic and access and parking, The downtown C4 district does not require any off-street parking be provided for uses within the district. For the most part, there are a few exceptions, but neither of these uses, a tattoo parlor or a beauty salon, would be in that category. There is on-street parking on both Fifth Street and Walnut Street, and there's also public parking lots to the northwest on Fifth Street and to the southwest on Fifth Street, which are in easy walking distance to the applicant's tenant space. So when the Planning Commission looks at their options available to them, they could approve the conditional use permit application as submitted. The findings of fact can be made. They could approve the conditional use permit application subject to revisions or conditions with a new site plan. They could postpone consideration of the application if additional information is needed, or they could deny the application if the required findings of fact cannot be made. And I feel like this is a non-conducive location for the tattoo parlor to take place in. Staff does have a number of conditions that we used in the past on the other two tattoo parlors that are in the downtown, so we're to be consistent with those past precedents and how the Planning Commission has treated those other two conditional uses for tattoo parlors in the downtown. We do have 12 different conditions of approval that we would recommend if the Planning Commission chooses or determines to approve the requested conditional use permit. So with that, we will take any questions that you might have.
Any questions for staff?
So the only actual, I guess I should say actual, that was just one email that was sent that was against putting the, and I guess when in reading it, I mean, it's just, is this person talking to just, one person, or are they talking about several different people that they've
Right.
visited with?
So that's a good point. We do have some written correspondence of some interested parties who are opposed to the conditional use permit application. And from what I understand, they are from the across the street on the northwest corner. And those concerns are listed in an email that should be in your packet. But the gist of the email, as I read it, is that they feel that the proposed conditional use permit would detract from the desired professional nature of the area and could deter patrons from coming to their tenants' businesses. So they feel like this particular use could detract from the attractiveness and therefore the foot traffic and the people coming into the area to do business in the various tenant spaces in the area.
From looking at the storefront, I don't think you could have a more professional storefront the way it looks. And like you said, unless you really stare at it and look at it, you're not going to know that it's has anything to do with a tattoo parlor to start with. I see no problems with it at all. I mean, like I said, I think it's a very professional storefront and very attractive for that area.
Has there been any complaints received on the Santa Fe tattoo parlor?
I have not received any complaints. A while back, and it's been a few years since I've been involved and heard complaints, there were some complaints with the Iron Street one, and that major complaint was loitering. I haven't heard any complaints recently, but Mr. Andrew may have some additional information on that.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever received a comment or concern or complaint about the one on South Santa Fe and the one on East Iron. We haven't heard anything about for 3 years or so. So they don't appear to be calling attention to themselves. And I think the email from this individual talked about caution for personal safety, and we simply don't have any occurrences or anything that we can tie to that relates in any way between tattoo parlors and anyone's personal safety. The the primary comments about the one on East Iron dealt with the loitering and then a high propensity of those loitering to be smoking and that just called attention to the place. But the one on South Santa Fe, we haven't heard anything about at all.
I do have a question for staff for the 117 South Santa Fe, on part of the staff recommendations. I thought that when we went through that, we changed that so that there was not a time limit on it, since there were other businesses in the area that didn't have a time limit also. So if there was a something going on during Santa Fe, that they were not limited to a time frame. So why are we putting a restriction on one business when we're not the other ones in the same area?
Yeah, that's something.
And my recommendation would be that we remove the hours of operation restriction.
I think
I'd agree with that.
the recollection was that we recommended that on the 117 South Santa Fe one because it had been applied to the one on East Iron, but that carried over here for consistency. But my recollection is that didn't get, there was a request made by the applicant and the city planning commission concurred with that. So you are not, there's nothing written in stone about those hours other than attempt to be even-handed in our treatment. And if you think it's more even-handed to have no hour limitations, then condition number 1 could simply be deleted.
That would be my recommendation going forward.
This is Margie. I just wanted, for the record, we cannot hear Commissioner Olson through the meeting. And so if anybody's watching from home, they probably can't hear him very well. I can hear everybody else just fine.
Can you hear me now? It's kind of like a
Yes. much
commercial.
better.
Yes, thank you.
Found the reason my mic was turned off. Sorry about that.
Any more questions for staff?
So the discussion, Margie, for your benefit, was Commissioner Olson questioned why staff had recommended a time hours of operation in condition number 1 when we didn't apply that to the 117 South Santa Fe tattoo parlor, and staff just indicated that if we wanted to treat this evenly with that, then condition number 1 could just be deleted. So that was the gist of our discussion.
Thank you.
And I did not turn my mic off.
Any other questions? Do we have members of the public who would like to comment on this item?
I can say a little
Could-
more to the letter that was sent.
Could you come up to the podium, please, and then,
Oh my.
yeah, that's just a formality, but you need to give your full name and your address as well, please.
My address as well?
Yeah, it's just part of the
Yeah,
format.
I'm Audrey George, 2313 Linden Drive. That is here in Salina.
Thank you.
I did not write this letter, but it is just, I'm here on behalf because she was not able to be here. She is the owner of our property. I work at Design Central, which is just to the northwest of the location that we're discussing. And just to speak to some of your questions that you had, she was mostly concerned about the professionalism of the building itself. And I can attest to and agree that, yes, the building plan does look professional as long as that's continued to carry out, which is fantastic. Something she didn't quite note as strongly in the letter, but I know we spoke of personally, was the question of loitering and anybody coming to and from the business at different hours of the day, whether that be daytime or extended hours in the evenings, and the safety concerns with potential loitering. Now hearing a little more on behalf of the fact that it might be appointment only, that does sound like something that would be a little more acceptable and, again, cut down that loitering question looming in the air. Mostly was just concerned about the safety aspects with the tattoo parlor, finding it very nice and acceptable, the salon being in the front space, and that if the tattoo parlor truly is kind of blocked off to the further pushback area in the building, that that could be more and more acceptable. So again, just here on behalf of what she wanted to have said, and that would be it.
Well, thank you for your time, and we appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else from the public? Okay.
We do not appear to have anyone on Zoom either, just for the good of the group.
Thank you. Thanks for keeping me honest. Kind of forgetting that Zoom aspect of it. Still adapting.
I guess my comments kind of going back to it is I understand businesses have fears of businesses around them, but I mean, there are medical professionals with tattoos, there's legal professionals with tattoos, there's professionals across the board that have tattoos. I don't believe the stigma attached with that anymore. I like the design of it, it looks really well. The one that's approved for 117, I walked by it during Christmas time when we were doing shopping, and it was very nice location, didn't have any issues with it, so I would make a motion to approve application CU 21-1 for conditional use to allow the operation of a tattoo parlor.
Second.
And does your motion include elimination of condition 1?
Yes, it does include the recommendations on page 6 and 7 with the exception of the restriction on the business hours.
Outstanding. I agree with you on those points, by the way.
I'll keep that second.
We ready for a vote? Those in favor say aye.
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 So that motion carries, and that does not go into the city commission. That would be a final decision for the Alaskas, and we'll get you a letter that summarizes today's action and gives you the green light. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Good luck with your business.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
We appreciate your time.
One thing I guess we would confirm is, we know that Commissioner Bernhardt is in the meeting, but we haven't actually heard him vote, so we want to make sure that we're recording his votes correctly, and maybe we would ask him to just speak really quick if he has in fact voted positive on, or yay on the last few items that we voted on, just to confirm.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, yes, I have voted aye on everything so far.
Great, thank you.
So our next item is item 3.4. It's also a public hearing item, and it's an application for a conditional use permit to establish and operate a group daycare home in an R2 residential zoning district. And the location is a property at 133 South Phillips Avenue in the vicinity of Cottonwood Elementary. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Hers if he's ready to shift gears.
I think we are ready. So this application is from an applicant named Caitlin Barnes, and her story is she currently operates a group daycare, and she is losing her lease, or actually has lost her lease now. Her lease was not renewed, so she had to scramble to try to find a new location. And in the housing market as such it is, this is the location that she found, and it's 133 South Phillips, and you can see it's just south of University Place and north of Walnut on Phillips. And the reason that we are before you is because anytime we have what we call a group daycare home, it allows for up to 12 children, which is 2 additional children over what the licensed daycare home allows. A licensed daycare home allows 2 children. A group daycare home allows 12 children. And the caveat to that is that the group daycare home requires an assistant care provider as well as a second care provider. And it's that second care provider that causes the group daycare home to be a conditional use permit rather than a permitted home occupancy like a licensed daycare is. And so currently, the applicant has 12 children she cares for, and so she's trying to continue to care for those children and accommodate the families of those children, and so she's requested this conditional use permit. In looking at compliance with the zoning regulations, this particular property is part of the University Edition, which was platted in 1884. And the house that's there, it was built in 1910, with a lot of the houses around it built in a similar time frame between 1900 and 1910. So it's it's over 100 years old. A lot of this development is. And as such, it has what we would call a lot of pre-existing non-conforming conditions, meaning it has some shortcomings when it comes to meeting the current strict application of the zoning ordinance. Most notably, the lot is only 45 feet wide by 100 feet deep. This causes it to have a 4,500 square foot lot area. And it also increases the lot coverage from the maximum of 35 to over 41%. And so there's some challenges that come along with that. And probably the most notable for the applicant in this particular case is that the conditional use regulations as they pertain to home occupations for group daycare homes requires that the lot be at least 6,000 square feet in order to be eligible for a group daycare home. And this was something that wasn't identified by staff until we started reviewing the application after we've already assisted the applicant in applying for the conditional use permit and coming to this board. But the result of that realization is a few things. One, it means that this process has become a 2-step process instead of a 1-step process. And step 1 is to request approval from the Board of Zoning Appeals for the necessary lot width and lot size variances. So she'll have to get variances for the variance approvals for those nonconformities. And then step 2 is to have the Board of Zoning Appeals approve the applicant's request for lot dimension variances, and the conditional use permit application can then come back before the Planning Commission. So the Board of Zoning Appeals would first approve the necessary variances for the lot size, and then the Planning Commission could potentially approve the conditional use permit application. There are a few things that come with being a smaller site. One is the backyard is fairly non-existent because as you look on the aerial photo, you have the detached garage, and the green space is mainly on the north side of the house, the west side of the house, or the front yard, with a little bit on the south. And we have a sort of a layout of what we believe the outside play area is to be proposed to be. After speaking with the applicant, she's going to kind of clarify those dimensions because they're not completely represented accurately. On my drawing, it sounds like the fence, which is marked in red here, would actually not come quite as far east as what it's shown here, but would be somewhere in this area maybe, but she'll clarify on that. So the challenges that the site has is it doesn't meet all of the minimum lot area requirements. The outdoor play area is forced to be to the front yard, potentially with the side yards also impacted, which impacts visibility as well as creates a situation where the play area is out front towards the street and easily visible by the neighbors and people passing by. And it also has unique parking situation where the garage is set back 14 feet from the property line. It is a 2-car garage, so it could house 2 vehicles, and there could be a drop-off lane that's kind of perpendicular to the house or parallel to the alley, and that's what the applicant is proposing. And so normally what is required for a conditional use permit for a group daycare home is all residential properties for a single-family dwelling are required to have 2 off-street parking spaces. So that's the baseline. And then for a conditional use permit for a daycare, there's also an additional parking space that's required for the assistant care provider. So 3 parking spaces are typically required for a group daycare home. In this case, the applicant has 3 parking spaces. However, rather than having 2 off-street parking spaces for personal dwelling, she would request that she would only be required to have 1 parking space for a personal dwelling, so that the second spot in the garage could be used by the care provider, and then the driveway could be used as a loading, unloading zone for parents to drop off their kids and come in and out of the back door. So the plan of operation is there is a back porch with a door that could be used to enter and exit the structure, and the applicant believes it'd be more conducive to have parents drop off and pick up kids next to that door rather than doing it along the curb in the front along Phillips Avenue. But in order to do that, the Board of Zoning Appeals would have to look at removing the requirement or giving her relief from the requirement, a variance from the requirement that the single-family residence has 2 off-street parking spaces. And one of her arguments for that she will present to the Board of Zoning Appeals is that she is the only resident of the house, and she only has 1 vehicle, so she doesn't need 2 parking stalls. So that would be another challenge that the site has. So I just wanted to give you a kind of summary of the application that the applicant has, knowing that you can't actually approve it today. So you have 2 options available to you, and option 1 is you can postpone consideration of the application until the Board of Zoning Appeals has a chance to review and approve the minimum lot area variance of 1,500 square feet from the minimum required lot area of 6,000 square feet to allow a 4,500 square foot property to have a group daycare home. Or if you just find that this site is just not suitable and you don't want the applicant to go through the effort of going through all that, you could deny the application today if you don't feel it's an appropriate location for a group daycare home. So, or the challenges are just too severe to overcome. So with that, I'll take any questions, but those would be the two options that you would have to consider. And the applicant is here to kind of fill in some gaps that I might have had.
Okay. Dustin, in your experience, isn't daycare facilities at a premium right now?
It's beyond a premium, probably.
Extreme shortage.
So I guess the quandary would be if we overlook some of this stuff and let the clientele kind of decide if those shortcomings are something they want to overlook and send their kids to,
and you
let
can't,
the market decide
you wouldn't be able
those
to
things.
actually approve the conditional use permit today. The most you could do is give some thought to the applicant as to any concerns you may have, to give her time to think about how she might address those concerns. But as to approving the application, you wouldn't be able to actually do that today. You can ask her questions and kind of give your thoughts or give her feedback to help her. But yeah, daycare is always in short supply, and it's a tricky situation. And the reason it's a conditional use permit is because there's a quasi-commercial nature to it, that with it being a home occupation business, and making sure that we are not only doing things that are good for the community, like providing daycare, but also doing things that are good for the neighborhood and making sure that we're not eroding any of that residential character of that neighborhood.
And
One thing that I didn't mention, and it may have or may not have an impact, it is close to Cottonwood School, and so it is a lot of children in the area and has a very children feel to it already, but that's just something I thought I'd mention.
Just to clarify that this is talking about moving from a licensed care home to a group daycare home. So if it is not a group daycare home, doesn't mean it can't be used for licensed daycare. The primary distinction, as Dustin mentioned, is just the number of children that can be cared for at any one time and having the additional helper. But just if it, even in the interim, if it can't be licensed as group daycare, it could continue to be used as licensed daycare. So it's not that it can't be used for daycare at all. It's just that we have special rules in the ordinance for a group daycare home category that are over and above a licensed daycare.
So you're actually saying then that it's not actually a licensed, it doesn't a group daycare doesn't have to be licensed?
No, it is licensed, it's just in a different category. So
Has a higher
there used to
standard.
be 3 categories. There used to be registered, licensed, and group, and now registered has disappeared. So now you just have a licensed daycare or you have a group daycare, and the applicant is trying to move up into the group daycare, which allows for care to up to 12 children and requires a helper to assist with that. And so we're talking about the incremental increase from licensed daycare to group daycare, and that is the distinction.
Do we think there's a problem, though? Like I said, I live right around the corner, so, I mean, I know exactly where the house is and everything. Do we foresee a problem with the square footage moving forward with them approving the square, with the difference in the square footage?
Well, as the reason that we have the 2 options is if we had a situation where it went to the Board of Zoning Appeals first and the Board of Zoning Appeals said, we agree to grant the variances, but then you say, well, we don't care because we don't think it's suitable anyway, we would hate to have something like that happen. So
No, I understand that part.
If that were the case, option 2 is to say, doesn't matter if you get variances or not, we don't think this is suitable. Under option 1, you're saying, we are willing to consider this, but we have to let the Board of Zoning Appeals go first. And that's partially on us because we didn't recognize that immediately.
Okay.
But that is, historically, that's been, you can give any indications of how you feel about it or how supportive you are of it, and we can even communicate that to the Board of Zoning Appeals, but they have to go first and grant the variances to let you make the finding that it meets the criteria.
That's a tough one, because I'm always a fan of people trying to grow their business and privately owned businesses, but this just seems like a challenge for a lot of reasons, and
Now, I have a question. As far as the previous location that was at 442 South College, that would actually fall in the same school district as this new property, right? So if she had 12 kids before, this new location would still fall within walking distance to that school. And so, I mean, I think that would help retain a lot of those kids that she's caring for.
So to clarify on that, that was a misunderstanding on my part. That's the applicant's previous residential location. What I didn't understand is that she had a commercial daycare and a commercial property that she was leasing. And I misunderstood that when I wrote the staff report, and I found that out this afternoon when the applicant contacted me and corrected my misunderstanding. But to your point, there is was, I don't know if it's still operating, a conditional use permit for a group daycare home just down the street on that same block of College. So you're right, there are daycares in the area, with some of them being of the group daycare home persuasion.
And it's a positive to have a group daycare home in close proximity to elementary schools. That's a positive attribute.
So our biggest question at this point comes back to our 6,000 square feet to our 4,500 square feet. which is where variance comes into. And the reason
Yeah,
for the 6,000 square feet is for the number of children that would be on that lot at that point in time.
Yeah, and I think the other thing which bears some further discussion today, just looking at it from our previous experience and understanding, if Dustin wanted to put up that aerial with a play area, I guess it's conceivable if you have two helpers, but most of the play areas that have come before the commission, the play areas in the back of the house, and you don't get into the sides or certainly to the front. And one of the concerns here is if you had play areas on both sides of the house, it's a little hard to keep tabs on 3 different play areas. But that is not part of the zoning ordinance question. It's more just going to the suitability of the play area question. But that was another item that it seemed like having three separate play areas where line of sight was not good, was not desirable, but that is not something that would be considered by the Board of Zoning Appeals. It's primarily that it's unusual for a lot this small to have that much building coverage on it. So that is the main thing, that if you believe that this property has flaws on it that are not, that can't be cured by zoning variances, then that would be good to know, because it doesn't help anyone to send the case to the Board of Zoning Appeals, have it come back, and so it would be important to know. The item 1 basically says that you're willing to consider this as a group daycare site, but recognize that the Board of Zoning Appeals has to weigh in on those items first.
These are all guidelines set forth by the state, correct?
Well, these particular on the lot size and things like that are local zoning ordinances. The actual operating rules for play area and for things like that are set by the state of Kansas, not locally. What we're doing is regulating the land use and the dimensional requirements of the lot. But the other things, whether the height of fencing, the location of fencing, those types of things, those are covered through state administrative regulations that apply statewide.
Okay, and I guess what I'm scratching at is that square footage requirement it's not set forth due to safety concerns, it's more other factors.
Well,
of the
it's just
issue.
the fact that a 6,000 square foot lot, if we had that and didn't have 4,500 square feet, a lot of these issues that were being discussed wouldn't come into play. It's just that to minimize impact and whatever reason, when group daycare homes were added as a conditional use, those dimensional requirements were set, and it's actually lower than other conditional uses in the R2 district. The minimum lot size is 15,000 square feet, so 6,000 is a reduction from that. But those are zoning ordinance things that are summarized in that table. The other aspects, having the additional helper and things like that, are handled locally by the county health department with regulations established through the state of Kansas.
And I'll add to that the Salina County Health Department has been out to the site along with building services staff and the fire department. And aside from the conditional use permit requirements and the necessary variances that would be involved, it does meet all of the requirements of the health safety features.
Okay,
And
that helps.
Leanne Montoy with the Salina County Health Department is here to speak on any of those kind of state requirements as to daycares, if that's something that you would like to talk to her about.
Better.
I think so, yeah. I mean, if you have anything to add, we would love to have you come up, please. Thank you.
Leanne Montoy, Saline County Health Department. I'm the Child Care Licensing Coordinator. And like Dustin said, it's very typical for us, the team, the community team, to go out and assess these sites together. Caitlin currently well, she just lost her lease, but prior to this month, she had a lease in a commercial building. It was still a group daycare home, because we do allow those in places other than homes. And so she already is caring for this population of children. I think she probably has some critical care parents, some real families that are part of our infrastructure, and that she has stayed open during COVID. She's tried hard to keep these children in a safe, secure environment. She has good compliance history with licensing. We're inspecting these places. Our inspections are unannounced. And our regulation books, are pretty significant. They're not as bad as theirs, but they're pretty significant. And she, maintains excellent compliance. What I'd like to say about, whether it's attractive to have children playing in a yard, in the front, et cetera, in a residential neighborhood, I don't know where you'd want them other than out front. I mean, to me, that's where children belong. They belong in a residential neighborhood. I don't think childcare is a commercial business. It's close to an elementary school, and we would be displacing many families. She can give you those details. But if we didn't allow her to maintain her capacity that she's at, you're going to displace her workers. I don't know if she'd have 2, 3, 4 people that would be unemployed. She offers some extended hours for childcare, which is almost impossible to find. She's probably one of maybe 5 or 6 people in the whole community that offer extended hours for care. So those families would really be in a bind, and her staff. We then would have people that are unemployed. I have no concerns about the property. Her family has also purchased this property already. And so if this isn't approved, what a hardship that is for that family. And like the staff mentioned, these were some things that kind of came up later. They had already purchased the property, but they didn't come up at, I don't think, our initial inspection when we were just out there visiting about some of these items. I don't have supervision concerns. She's always maintained good supervision, and with those extra staff, just like a school playground, the teachers aren't all, that's a huge property. But, teachers place themselves among it and supervise the children that way. It's the same way in childcare. And especially with younger children, the supervision we require is really hands-on. You can get to them quickly. They're within your sight. I think she can control that, where if we're in this area of the yard, then that's where we're at. And you don't let a 2-year-old go to another side where they're out of your sight. We have guidelines in place for that through the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. So,
Okay.
questions that I didn't answer?
Any questions?
Okay.
You've been very helpful. Thank you very
Good,
much.
sure. Thank you.
Do we need to hear from the applicant, or do you think we're ready to move forward? Okay. Anyone from the public like to comment on this issue? Anybody on Zoom?
I think Margie can confirm this. We did have a phone call from a neighbor in the vicinity, but they seemed to have more questions than concerns, and we gave them additional information about the application and also copies of some of the state regulations, and we did not hear from them again, so I can't say hopefully what we gave them addressed any questions or concerns they had, but we didn't have any emails or letters or anything in response to our notification letter. So I will say, and we have done this before in some similar circumstance. What we would do, would want to do in something like this is if the if the planning commission indicates that they are receptive to this as a group daycare home location, then what we would do is we would work with Leanne on basically having the applicant have what we would call an interim group daycare home license to allow it to operate with that classification, and then assist the applicant with the Board of Zoning Appeals requests. But if there is a indication from the commission that you are supportive of this as a group daycare home location, then we certainly don't want to interrupt or shut down any of the care that's being provided. So we would just have it licensed on an interim basis, with it not becoming final till the zoning items are corrected. So if you were to indicate, if you were to take action item 1 and postpone consideration, and there's an indication that the majority of commissioners support this as a location, then we would try to make sure that the care is not interrupted during the interim.
Any thoughts?
Well, I'd like to make a motion. Make a motion that we postpone the consideration of this application until the Board of Zoning Appeals has reviewed and approved a minimum lot area variance of 1,500 square feet from the minimum required lot of 6,000 to allow 4,500 square feet property to have a group daycare home.
And I would second.
All right. So
We have a-
motioned and seconded.
Motion and second to postpone consideration until the Board of Zoning Appeals has had a chance to review the lot size.
Discussion. Will they be able to operate now on that new location?
What I suggested is that we would work with Leanne at the Health Department to maintain an interim group daycare license classification while this works its way through, because we don't want to have any lost opportunities for childcare.
Yeah, and so will that be allowed now? Or is it?
It would be allowed on an interim basis while we work with the owner and the Board of Zoning Appeals to see if we can get the lot size varied.
Okay, does that require a motion?
No, we
Okay.
have a motion to postpone till the Board of Zoning Appeals has weighed in, and we're just stating that that's what we're going to work to see happen between that time and when this commission takes it back up.
I call for the vote.
All right. Let's vote. Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we'll get in contact with the applicant and with the Health Department about doing this on an interim basis pending Board of Zoning Appeals action, and then we'll bring this back to you for a firm decision.
All right, thank you. Good luck.
We have one final item, and that is coming to you as a public hearing item because our regulations that deal with plan development districts, if you have a final plan and that final plan results in a dramatic increase in square footage from what was approved preliminarily, then that can be done, but it requires notice to surrounding property owners. So this is an item that we did provide notice to surrounding property owners on, and it is an item that this commission has reviewed, and it's coming back before the commission because in our plan development district guidelines, it requires that if you've obtained approval of your site plan from the planning commission, you have to obtain a building permit within 18 months. And if you fail to do so, then the plan expires. And the primary reason for that is that you can have a changing ownership in the surrounding areas, changing circumstances, and so there's a chance if too much time goes by between the hearing and when actual development occurs, that people will either have changed hands or there would not be an awareness of what was planned there. So this was previously before the commission and is coming back for a second because the 18-month time period expired. And so if Mr. Hers is ready, I'll turn that over to him. But this has been a multi-stage project that started with the idea of creating a USD number 305 campus for the support operations relating to, so it has the catchy name of USD number 305 Operations Plan Development District. So, Dustin, are you ready?
Yes, I think we are ready. We actually skipped item 3.5, Dean, just so,
Okay.
but we can go back
I
to
guess
that.
we have
This
Mr.
won't
Miller
take,
behind me and I didn't see him,
yeah.
so.
This won't take but a moment because it's something that.
I know why I skipped over it because I feel so badly. I've already apologized to Mr. Miller. I apologize to the commission for having to bring this to you. But because in 2007, the Planning Commission imposed a condition on this market, we didn't have any choice but to bring it back. So Mr. Hers says he can be short and sweet, so we'll.
Yeah, we'll go, I guess we'll go with item 3.5, then we'll get back to the USD Operations Center. So Stutzman's Greenhouse was originally approved for a special use permit for an open air garden center at the northeast corner of Cloud and 9th Street. And that happened in 2007 and through a public hearing process. And at that public hearing, there was a number of members, when I say a number, I mean a couple, that were operators of farmers markets within the community, and they had concerns that Stutzman's might, in addition to their garden center and plant items that they would sell, that they would also sell fresh produce, fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, and they were opposed to that that type of business or that type of sales of fresh produce. And so at that time, Stutzman's was not interested in selling fresh produce, and Mr. Miller expressed that really what they were looking for and what their business was all about was plants and other garden accessory items, and that aside from pumpkins, they really at that point in time didn't sell fresh produce. Since that time, with their other store operations, Stutzman's has started to sell fresh produce from local farmers within the area, and they're looking to add fresh produce to this site as well. And because the original special use permit application had a condition of approval that prohibited them from selling fresh produce, we are not able to permit them to sell fresh produce unless the Planning Commission were to amend their special use permit to allow them to sell fresh produce at their site here in Salina. So that's really the story. That's the reason we're here is Stutzman's is looking to expand and sell some fresh produce at their site. The site doesn't actually change. The parking and the sales area, the shade structures and the tents, all of that is going to remain unchanged. The only change is that there will be some pallets of fresh fruit and vegetables in addition to the plants that you found there in the past. So with that, we'll take any questions or hear from the applicant.
And I think what I explained to Mr. Miller before the meeting, the same goes that in 2007, the farmers market was fledgling. They were kind of protective of their farmers market turf, and the view has completely changed now, where instead of having a single farmer's market or being exclusive. Actually, the view is that the more farmers markets and fresh produce there is, the better. And the Planning Commission has liberalized the regulations for farmers markets, and now they're allowed in church parking lots and other places. And so the view seems to be now is that having more outlets to have fresh produce available is better for all residents. And it's just that perspective has changed over time, and the perspective was different at the time in 2007. And as I said, we're somewhat embarrassed that we have to bring this before you, but Mr. Miller's been patient with us, and he's prepared to answer questions or explain their business plan. But our response was that the Planning Commission imposed that limitation, and until the Planning Commission eliminated it, that it was still in place. So,
All right. I mean, I'm going to assume that nobody here is opposed to selling fruits and vegetables.
I do have a question. Will the produce that they're selling be grown by them?
yeah, Mr. Miller can come to the podium and he can address that.
Yeah, Ben Miller with Systems Greenhouse. And first of all, I'd just like to say how much we have appreciated being here in Salina. You are our #1 store besides Pleasant View, so rock on. We have a couple producers locally. Ironically, one is also by the name of Miller, but it's Cheney Lake tomato operation that we start bringing in tomatoes about the first part of May. And they're not outdoor garden, they're hothouse growing. And so we have that kind of as a steady flow going on through. And then once we get into the summer, we'll be bringing in watermelon, cantaloupe, and the main one is in the fall, we bring in Colorado peaches. And we had some misinformation last year, and we had some in here last year, and it went well. I had a concern from a neighbor, and we worked that out, the dental shop, or the dental doctor, Dr. Moretti, and on a parking space, because they've been using some of our parking space, and we could just kind of in agreement. And he had a concern with how it was listed as we are expanding, these things fog up, we're expanding our business. In reality, more than anything, you will find it as a add-on sale as you get to the register. It is not a big thing that's going to really be creating a traffic situation at all. So we kind of got that cleared up with us, and so it's an item that we've had at all our other stores. We've got 12 other locations, or 11 other locations throughout central Kansas and Wichita, Sedgwick County. And it's just been something that's been adding on, and it has been appreciated by our customers. The cantaloupe, watermelon are all grown in St. John, large operation out there, and watermelon, cantaloupe are amazing. So very good. So again, I'd just like to say thank you, folks, for the hospitality that you've shown us as a company in Salina. You've been awesome. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Good to see you.
Is there anyone from the public on Zoom?
Did that address your question, Mr. Baffa?
Yes, it did.
We do not appear to have anyone on Zoom from the public that's interested in commenting.
Greg and Dean, can you hear me all right now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Can I recuse myself from a vote on this? They're one of our suppliers.
Yep. That would be something we would just identify in the minutes.
All right, thank you.
I'll move. We approve the application.
Seconded.
The application to remove that existing restriction?
Yes. So it's been motioned and
Yes.
seconded?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
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 So that carries 6-0 with Mr. Bernhardt abstaining. And so for your for your benefit, we renewed the permit for Stutzman's to allow them to reopen. This is simply to allow them to add to their product line. That's probably, I don't know, I reviewed the letter, so I don't know exactly what it said, but I think we indicated that we were allowing them to expand their offerings or expand their product line, but that could have been interpreted as expanding their footprint. But the layout and everything is the same that it's always been. It's just that there's going to be space there where produce will be offered. So we'll get that to you in writing, and we'll get that cleared up.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
All
and
right.
your patience.
So to continue on with our application PDD 113B, this is an application that the Planning Commission previously reviewed and approved, and this happened before all of the events around COVID, which shortened or rather prohibited the commencement of construction in the 18-month period that is standard for planned development district approvals. And so the school district was proposing to add a warehouse building to the south of their existing operations building on Broadway, south of Hageman. And it was a 12,000 square foot facility and had a potential future building of 18,000 square feet, and for a total of 30,000 square feet. The Planning Commission at the time approved the PDD plans for the new building with a condition that a left-out median be designed, reviewed, and approved by the city, not designed by city staff, but designed, submitted to city staff for their review and approval for a left-out break in the median. There is a median in Broadway, and the median is intended to be, at least according to the Planning Commission in 2019 when they met on this and approved it, a left turn out only, but not a left turn in. And so the idea there is that people leaving the site can get an angle on it to join traffic in the southbound lane of Broadway, but people coming south couldn't turn into the site with a left-hand turn. So that's what was reviewed and approved in 2019. The applicant, the school district, and Jones Gillum Wren's Architectures, they're proposing that the plan be approved once again. And so I don't know if there's any questions that staff might have.
You want to address the building elevations, Dustin?
Yeah, that's a good thing to touch on. So I'm going to run down the building elevations here. So in 2019, the Planning Commission approved elevations that looked like the alternate one west elevations, and this matches primarily what is existing, where you have some brick and masonry work, wainscoting that comes up to nearly the bottom of the windows and adds a little architectural texture as well as color. And what USD 305 is proposing this time around, that's different than the 2009 proposal, is to eliminate the brick on the outside and rather go with the architectural or ribbed metal all the way down to the wainscoting. And one of the conditions of approval that staff is recommending, if the Planning Commission wishes to approve the plan again, is that the applicant, USD 305, would have to construct the alternate one version, which has the brick that matches what's out there today and which matches the original approval by the Planning Commission. And there are, on the page, on page 12 a number of conditions of approval. There should be 4 of them, even though they're misnumbered.
So are they wanting to change just because of cost-wise, or?
That's a presumption. The applicant can speak to that. I'm guessing that there's budgetary considerations involved, but the alternate one design closely matches what was approved originally, and so that's what we would suggest and recommend.
I think that's true.
Also aligns with what they built, their operations center building that's to the north. The alternate one matches up with that as far as appearance-wise.
Now, isn't there a median on Broadway at that location?
Yeah, there's a median, if you can see on the aerial photo, right where that entrance is. And so what the applicant is proposing and what was approved in 2019 is that there would be a break in the median design where people leaving the operations center could make a left turn out and get south on Broadway, but people entering would not be able to turn in and cross the northbound traffic. And so the way that would be designed is by having an angle, a southern angle to it, if you will, on the break-in access. And we've got kind of a preliminary drawing here that I can show you that kind of shows that a little bit. One of the things that staff is suggesting is that it be angled a little more severely to the south, because it does appear that somebody coming southbound could still turn and come into the site if they so chose to. And we'd really want to encourage people to only use it as a left out. And so we feel like having that island extended just a little bit further south or more severely would make sure that it's used as a left out only and not a left in. And that's the first condition of approval. It's numbered as 4 because there was a software issue evidently that I didn't check with didn't catch with the numbering there. But that would be condition number 1, that the city engineer shall approve final design plans and dimensions for the proposed median break in Broadway Boulevard prior to removal of the landscape median.
Okay, I also could not see the plant list, even though I tried to blow it up many times. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but I would like to see what plants were chosen for the landscape.
I'll see if I can find one for you. Well,
Hey, Dustin.
yes.
To go off Mr. Boffa's point he's been bringing up, is it something that we can do as a planning commission, or is this a different area that we could possibly review the suggested plant material for Salina?
No, that's within the purview of the planning commission, is to go through the recommended plant lists and over time modify it appropriately so that it works with our soil types, climate types, and all those criteria. I mean, the goal that we have in mind and what was done to make it, to create it originally was K-State Extension Office, our local Parks and Forestry Department, and the Dick Arboretum worked together to create a list of plantings that do well with our climate and soil type. A number of them are native, but not 100% of them are native, as Commissioner Baff has pointed out. But there are, new plantings that could be considered to be added to the list if additional plantings are viewed to be on the list that aren't on the list currently.
Okay.
Well, my point is that I would like to see, the tree board and the planning commission get together to develop a native plant list and make Salina more wildlife friendly?
I'm looking for the landscape planting list, and I'm struggling. to
There
come
is-
across it.
Yeah, there is a list, but it's so small.
I don't think the full list is.
Perhaps the
Oh, here we go.
perhaps the architect can answer.
I found it. Just have to get it.
Dustin, if you'd like me to share my screen, I can share my screen and blow that up if you'd like.
I just came across it, Charles. Thank you. So we have smoke trees, junipers, switchgrasses, and gray owl junipers.
And there are
I
photographs
don't believe
of
the
each of
smoke tree is
those.
yeah. I don't believe the smoke tree is a native plant.
And Dustin, just FYI, this was developed off of the lands. This was directly off of the landscape plan from the existing building, the existing operations center.
Right.
So this was an effort to maintain the continuity of that.
So a little bit of history on that.
facility.
King Kennedy, who preceded Chris Upson with the school district, University 305, they had a plan for this area, which was highly xeriscape plantings, because they wanted some lower growing ground covers that showcased what xeriscaping could potentially look like. And so they chose a lot of what we would call hardy plants, plants that don't require a lot of maintenance, don't require a lot of water, a lot of energy, but still can thrive within our climate zone and within our soil types. And so that was something that Mr. Kennedy at the time, the applicant, worked with the Planning Commission on the previous phase with the Operations Center. And so what Mr. Renz, the applicant's representative, has indicated is that these plantings were chosen in order to carry forward and continue the same look and feel of the existing landscaping so that it was continuous.
That doesn't mean, though, that we can't substitute other trees besides the smoke tree. I understand the point, but, we have to start somewhere, thinking wildlife.
I guess
Justin, we wouldn't have any objection in revisiting that particular plant there. We wouldn't have any issue working with staff to, come up with a substitution, and if we need to do that.
I have a question and comment not related to the plants, but when we addressed this initially in May of 19, there was not the break in Broadway Boulevard, and there was the question on that for the traffic flow in and out because of traffic coming out of that and southbound traffic. So why is there now a break in this plan on Broadway?
The Planning Commission approved a break in the plan in 2019. It never got designed, or we didn't have a drawing that depicted it. But the motion of the Planning Commission approved a break in the median, but limited the movement to left turn out only.
Okay, so it's just that it wasn't shown at that point in time? Because I remember the discussion.
Right. The plan that was submitted and reviewed by the Planning Commission did not visually depict the break in access, but as part of the discussion and deliberation of the Planning Commission, they approved breaking the median, but imposed a condition that it would be for left turn out only and not for left turns in. So the only difference between now and what was submitted in 2019 is we now have received a drawing that depicts where and a conceptual design for the median break, which we had not received in 2019.
Okay.
So the reason, I mean, the condition is worded the same. The difference was that in 2019, you had a limitation that they needed to prepare a design plan for that median, but you gave guidance that you wanted it to be a left turn out only.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Any other discussion or questions? So where are we with that fascia and the variance in the two plans?
I think we need to go with the alternate one like they originally had. I think it's going to
Dustin,
be cohesive to the building.
Dustin, this is Charles. I just had sent a message out to room 107, but we did decide a couple weeks ago when we did the project that we are proceeding with the brick and the block at the west elevation. So we should be a total match to the existing building.
Okay.
And then in regard to the questions about the left turnout and the break in the median, we worked through that pretty closely with our civil engineers on the project to locate that correctly. The concern is, if we shift everything, if we shift that median break too far back to the south, then we create a condition where, those exiting the campus are, driving back into traffic a little bit more than is desired. I don't think we would have any issue in reducing the radius on that curve that you had pointed out earlier. If engineering staff is in agreement that is acceptable, I think we're open to that. But that the layout as you see it is what was worked through, with the civil engineers and getting that, trying to do what we could to make sure that is still a safe exit from the campus while eliminating, that left turn in from southbound traffic on Broadway.
That's what our concern was. Yeah, and I would agree, that's what our concern was, is that people were going to try to make a left-hand turn on southbound, and they were going to be stopped, and somebody wasn't going to see them at that point and just run into the back end of them. So make it as close as possible so that they can't make that left-hand turn out of that southbound.
Yeah, and you are correct. In the drawings that were presented to the Planning Commission in 2019, none of the drawings even showed a concept for that. It was just discussed verbally, and so you had a condition that it had to be designed and approved by the city engineer. The main difference now is the architect is showing you a concept for what that would look like. There's our message. So it appears that the one that's labeled base bid is off the table, and so the alternate one would be the elevation drawings that would be incorporated into your action this afternoon.
That helps.
Do I have to make in the motion a way of eliminating the non-native smoke trees, or can it just be assumed that will happen?
Well, I don't think you can assume that it will happen because I think, and we've discussed this previously, there doesn't seem to be any consensus meeting of the minds of native versus non-native plantings. We've even handed out our list to different groups and individuals to mark on our current list which ones are considered native and non-native, and they don't match. So if you're wanting to amend the planting plan, you're going to have to advise staff, your fellow commissioners, and the applicant, give us some idea of what a substitute would be that would be acceptable for the smoke tree.
Well, any species of the native oaks, the bur oak is just
But
a great tree.
We can't put shade trees in here because it's a xeriscaping plan for low-growing plants. So the only acceptable substitute would be something that grows to the same height as the smoke tree.
I'd like to make.
Okay, well then Washington hawthorn would be good native plant.
I'd like to.
But I really don't want to make that a big issue, but I just need Salina to be thinking about, wildlife.
I'd like to make a comment on, and I understand the notion and the good nature of all this, but at the end of the day, I'm just speaking for myself. I'm not a landscape architect. I have no background in landscaping, and I don't think it would be right for me to vote and dictate when landscape architects have come in and done these plans, and then I just arbitrarily decide, I like this plant or that plant and start nitpicking at. And I'm not saying that's what's happening, but I think it kind of opens a door where we're starting to maybe do these odd customizations to existing plans when we've already had experts and architects look at it, and then we're kind of, to me, I'm operating out of my wheelhouse. I'm not comfortable voting on landscape details.
Yeah, I agree with you, but because I don't want to make a big deal out of it, but I just want to be thinking about, natives and wildlife. I will, if I would make the motion, I won't make that part of it. But I'd just like to convey that information to the architect.
Well, we know it's coming from a good place, Dan, and there's no doubt about that. I'm just commenting on my perspective of it, and it's kind of a nuanced
Greg.
item.
Greg, this is Derek.
Yes.
The issues really with that plant list that we're seeing out in the field is a lot of it isn't available anymore. It's been replaced with newer varieties. Our climate zone has changed from when that was put together, so there's a whole more abundance of different type of plants we can use here that are adapted for this area. So it's a really outdated list. A lot of stuff is on that list is becoming hard to get, or there's improved varieties that we should be getting instead of stuff on that list. More bug resistant, drought resistant varieties of some of that stuff on the list. So I think it all kind of stems to maybe just an overhaul of the recommended tree list and shrub list, and I think that would fix a lot of the issues for Salina.
I agree 100%.
I agree with you, Mr. Renz, and I've been asking for a meeting with the tree board to revise that list for quite a while now. But I don't want it to be a killer either. I'll make the motion we approve if we're ready to.
Just want to make sure there's nobody from
We don't
the
have
public on
any
Zoom.
in the public.
We have nobody from the public on Zoom.
Thank you.
So I'd refer everybody to page 12 of the report. It has staff's recommendation would be to recommend approval of the amended final development plan for Phase 3, including the proposed 12,000 square foot building with the 18,000 square foot addition, the proposed landscape plan, and the alternate number 1 building elevations, and the access break in the Broadway Boulevard median. And then we have 4 recommended conditions that would be incorporated as part of that action.
And that's what that was my motion.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries, and we will communicate that information to Mr. Renz, who's the architect for USD number 305.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that takes us to, we have any legislative matters?
We don't have any legislation that we're working on. The Salina City Commission has had a number of study sessions on housing and production of housing and incentivizing certain types of housing, and there's just a situation with the expansion at Schwann's with the plans for reopening the Phillips Lighting, Signify, and converting it to Great Plains production, and with a situation where there's a company called Vision One that does airline maintenance out at the airport, and there have been challenges with getting appropriate and a quantity of housing for employees related to those enterprises, and so there's been a lot of discussion. One of the discussions last night, there were a lot of different housing forms and types that were discussed, and some city commissioners asked about whether our zoning ordinance would allow those forms of housing, and so it's possible that in terms of legislative matters that there might be a need to adjust some of the things in our residential zoning classifications or rules. And so because we're limited with time and staffing and some other things, there hasn't been a lot of legislative initiatives, but if there is a need to adjust something in our residential zoning codes, our first stop will be to bring.
Would that be in terms of population density or
Oh,
occupancy? Or
I'm not sure, because I don't have any things that most of the different, it has a lot to do with density, and I think just the fact that there haven't been that many multifamily housing projects, and even, these attached homes, or when you see fourplexes, sixplexes, things like that, that's just not a common housing product that's been,
well,
and so there's not a lot of experience to know, well, do we not have that because our zoning doesn't accommodate it, or do we not have that because nobody has proposed building it? So we don't know, but there's a possibility that in the future, near future, we might be working with the commission on some adjustments to that, but it hasn't reached that point yet. But there's a potential that if the funding and the incentives are clarified and those kind of things, there could be quite a spike in residential-related applications coming before the Planning Commission. So,
Has there been any discussion, Dean, of tiny homes?
That was not one of the forms of discussion that was discussed. There was some discussion about manufactured homes, which could possibly include that, but most of the limitations that deal with tiny homes are found in the building code, not in the zoning code. So, but that was not, most of what's talked about was density was also talked about, a lot of builders in Salina seem to have an aversion to building two-story homes. And so one of the ways to get more square footage is to have smaller lots and do more vertical and less horizontal. And so
Ooh.
those are
I was
things that are being discussed.
just in the Indianapolis area last weekend, and I was in such a housing development, and they were roughly a decade to 5 years old. And they were newer, the architecture was appealing to the eye. I felt claustrophobic in that development in terms of just almost like it was just a stone's throw away from like the old brownstones, like when you go to New York or Philadelphia, where it's just there's minimal distance between the homes. And with that added story, just my input on it, and it just felt shoehorned, I guess is the best way to describe it.
But it's not that our codes necessarily prohibit density, it's just that there haven't been a lot of proposals for density, and we don't know where things will end up on that, but that was just one of the concepts that was proposed, that, smaller lot sizes, things closer together, those types of things. There's been a huge spike in building materials costs, and that's we've had building permits amended in midstream to take basements, remove basements from homes to save costs and things like that, and after we'd already issued a permit for a home with a basement. So there is quite a bit of sticker shock right now with the building materials, and so that hasn't all shook out yet, but that's what we see on the horizon is on any future legislative matters is primarily going to focus on that. And then we are going to try to, as we're opening up again and hope to have more social life downtown, we'll be bringing back some of our concepts that were discussed before about our downtown activities and entertainment ordinance, and getting some of those things finalized. And so those are kind of on the legislative horizon. We will try to schedule a joint session with the tree board and discuss our xeriscaping plant list. It's on our to-do list, but that's kind of one of those things that requires in-person social interaction to really get the full exchange of ideas. And I can't speak to for sure whether we're going to have a meeting, the first meeting in May, but we have quite a number of projects that are at the discussion stage or handing out application stage, and this commission approved a plat for Mr. Hayworth at the Cedar Point addition up on Cedar Ridge Drive, and Mr. Hayworth has kind of decided he wants to phase out of development, and he's trying to sell that to another party to finish. And so I met with them this afternoon.
Interesting.
And I don't know if you all are familiar with the Delray Estates mobile home park. It's up on North 13th Street. It's now almost entirely gone, and every single home removed, and there is a potential buyer that wants to, after it's cleared, redevelop that and reestablish manufactured homes there, but at a different standard than what was done before. And I met with them and explained that their layout plan for number of units, sizes, all that that'll have to come before the Planning Commission before that's redeveloped. So those are some of the things on the horizon, and we've done a lot of commercial stuff during COVID, but we see the pendulum swinging back to maybe more residential things coming before the commission. So I know we're handing out lots of applications and talking to applicants and handing out schedules, and we know those will come back at some point. But some of them are out along South 9th Street, and then we've got there's been some discussion about making the roads that lead into the Great Plains Manufacturing Campus on East North Street, turning those into private drives and closing and vacating those as public streets, and that will come before the Planning Commission. So we know we could have some more meetings like tonight, we just don't know when, but I just say don't be surprised if you get a packet that's thick or has 5 or 6 items on it, because those things are out there.
Understood.
So we're making up for it by meeting once a month, but you could have 5 or 6 item agendas moving forward here for a while. So I don't think we have anything else for you this evening, unless one of you has a weather report as to whether it's storming out there or not. So.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
I think that sounds
I
good.
second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Adjourned.